All right, guys, I'm just hopping on here to answer a very important query. And this is the number that every contractor needs to know, but most don't. So if you're in that category, I don't want you to feel bad about this video. Let this be a very, very important, pivotal moment in your contractor life. Because if I asked you right now what your overhead cost is per billable hour, would you know the answer off the top of your head? Because most contractors wouldn't. So if you're in that category, that's okay. I'm not surprised. But let's try and move you from that category to knowing that all important number. You know what you pay your employees. You know what you pay for materials. Those are important. You know roughly what comes into the bank account every month. But if I asked you your overhead recovery per billable hour, you likely couldn't tell me. And that's a huge problem because you need to know that number. If you don't know that number, you don't know if you're actually making money. In fact, I've seen contractors charge what they thought was a profitable hourly rate only to discover later, in fact, too late, that they weren't covering all of their overhead expenses. And this doesn't show up right away. They were working hard, staying busy, and still struggling to make a profit they thought that they should have been making. So today I want to show you how to calculate one of the most important numbers in your business. Let's start with a simple question. What is overhead really? Overhead is every expense required to keep your business operating that cannot be directly charged to a specific job. Or think of it this way. It's the expenses needed to keep your business open, whether you go to work or not, okay? So wages do not fit in this category because if you're not going to work, you're not paying your employees to go to the jobs, okay? So that's an operating expense. Sorry, that's an operating expense. We're talking about overhead expenses, okay? Things like office expenses, keeping the electric bill paid, okay? Keeping the heat paid, your phones, your insurance, any software subscriptions, shop rent, advertising, vehicle payments, fuel to a degree, not all fuel. Some fuel is job related, but we'll put fuel in there. Administrative wages, okay? And your owner's salary if you're spending time managing the business instead of producing work and completing jobs yourself. Equipment payments, equipment depreciation, that's a big one that gets left out and gets forgotten. Dozens of other expenses that keep the lights on, that keep your business effectively open for business. Here's an easy way to think about it. If the business spends money, whether you're on a job site today or not, that's probably overhead. Here's how many contractors, or where many contractors rather, make a mistake. They calculate overhead based on employee hours instead of billable hours. Those are not the same thing. It's not the number of hours you pay in wages, okay? Let's say you have one employee who works 40 hours a week. Many contractors assume that that's 40 billable hours, but it's not 40 billable hours. Think about everything that happens during a normal week. Drive time to and from the job, loading materials, picking up supplies, meetings, shop time, weather delays, equipment breakdowns, cleanup, callbacks, training, vacations, stat holidays. All those things have to be factored in. They all reduce the number of hours that you can actually sell to a customer. Maybe that employee works 40 hours but only produces 30 billable hours, and that distinction is critical. It's 33%. Because overhead has to be recovered through billable hours, not payroll hours. The customer doesn't pay you for the time you spend loading a trailer, or they don't pay you for rain days, or they don't pay you for a staff meeting. Those costs still exist, but they have to be spread across the hours that can actually be sold or billed for. Now let's take it a step further. Suppose you have 5 employees. Each employee averages 30 billable hours per week. Some contractors look at that and still think in terms of 30 hours. No, that's not 30 billable hours. That's 150 billable hours. 30 hours times 5 employees. You need to be billing for every employee that is on the job. You need to factor that in because it's costing you that. 5 employees times 30 billable hours each is 150 hours per week. Now, your overhead is being spread across 150 billable hours every week instead of 30. This is one of the reasons scaling can be so incredibly powerful, because as you scale up, as you grow your business, your overhead doesn't rise. It will rise, but it doesn't rise a lot. It doesn't rise commensurate or equal to your growth of staff. As your team grows, your billable hours increase, the amount of overhead that must be recovered by each individual hour can actually go down. Okay, that's more, the more productive hours you have, the more efficiently you can spread your overhead. Now, let's talk about the actual calculation. First, you have to determine your annual overhead. You've got to learn this number. Talk to your bookkeeper, your accountant, and find this out. Don't guess at it. Don't assume. Find what you're actually spending. Know those numbers. Add everything up. All of it. Insurance, office expenses, supplies, marketing, administrative staff, vehicles, software and depreciation on vehicles, accounting, administrative, payroll, equipment costs, everything. Don't miss a thing. Now, let's say the total amount of overhead is $150,000. Let's calculate your annual billable hours. You have 3 employees, okay? Each employee averages 1,500 billable hours per year, okay? That gives you 4,500 billable hours annually. Now divide your overhead. Remember, your 150,000. Divide it by 4,500 hours. That comes to $33.33 per hour. Think about what that means. Every single billable hour your company sells must recover $33.33 just to cover overhead. Not wages. You haven't paid any wages yet. You haven't bought any materials yet. Not any profit added in, just overhead. That's just to keep the lights on. Before you paid a staff member, technician, before you purchased a single piece of material, before you made $1 of profit, $33.33 per hour for every hour sold is already spoken for. And that's assuming that you meet 4,500 hours per year. If you have a year where it drops and you don't bill that much, that number per hour goes up even more. That's why so many contractors struggle with pricing their jobs. They're looking at wages and materials, and they're forgetting the cost of running the business itself. They're often forgetting some very important overhead expenses, things like equipment depreciation, which comes down to vehicle replacement costs. They will not last forever. Your trailers won't last forever. What about interest? What about small tools? What about warranty work? Recruiting costs, continuing education and training, safety programs, professional fees, bad debt. That's another one that people forget. The owner's administrative time. Every expense you forget lowers your overhead calculation artificially and gives you a false sense of security or profit. That can trick you into thinking you're making more money than you actually are. And this explains why a lot of contractors come to the end of the year and go, where did all the money go? I don't know. So the problem is that most contractors don't really have a pricing problem as much as they have an actual math problem underlying that pricing problem. If you don't know your overhead recovery per billable hour, you're guessing at pricing. When you're guessing at pricing, you're gambling with your entire business, with your profitability, with your future. Take the time to calculate your number. If you need help with that, reach out to me through the links in my bio, and I can help you with that. It might be the most profitable time that you spend all year long figuring out that number, because you can put your head in the sand and ignore it. But if you're losing money, the longer you do it, the more money you lose. Once you know that number, you'll start making pricing decisions based on facts instead of how you feel. This is absolutely critical. Figure out your overhead cost per billable hour to know what your overhead recovery should be.